In this video, we'll deal with operations management and look at some of the introductory concepts that are linked to this important area of management. So let's start by looking at managerial issues. Well, the first issue we could confront here, there are many to confront, but the first one we'll pick is the increasing power of consumers. There is a process of globalization. There is greater communications facilities now between business to business, business to consumer, and even consumer to consumer. There are all sorts of ways in which information can flow because of the advent of the internet and because of the advent of internet-related technologies. So it's not surprising, therefore, that the proliferation of information and the desire on the part of many countries to get their foot on the growth ladder, the economic growth ladder, has led to this process of globalization. Some countries have cheap labor in comparison to other countries, so they become centers of production. And this means that other countries become service centers and so on. So there's been a big restructuring of economics on a global scale because of the advent of more knowledge, more contact, and in a sense more openness between governments to allow trade to take place. But consumers have become more empowered through this whole process. The consumers now know where to shop for goods, to know the quality of the goods, to know what to expect, to know the prices to be paid, and they're able to do comparisons by just simply going online. So search has become very cheap. Historically, search was expensive to find out where products were, who was producing them, their particular qualities, their prices, to try and search for the best price. These were expensive activities, but now they've become relatively cheap. Now there are portals online, there are search engines, there are all sorts of facilities which enable consumers to check information very quickly. And this has led to more power for the consumers and therefore problems, in a sense, for businesses. Businesses must now be more competitive, more efficient, and there is pressure on business to facilitate the needs of the customers, to address the needs of the customers, but do so in an efficient and competitive manner. As I said, the development of e-business has almost rocked the world. It's now possible to shop for products in different countries, in different continents, and have the products delivered to your home. Now, this is phenomenal by historic standards, by the standards that were around, say, 50 years ago. And as we move forwards, these developments are becoming even stronger. There's greater use of technology, and the technologies become more reliable, more secure to some extent, and also more capable of delivering an experience which, although it's not the tactile experience of going to a shop, it illustrates the product in sufficient details for decisions to be made as to buying it or not buying it. So the development of e-business has been made a big impact on management in many companies. But there's also greater productivity. There's also an emphasis on better quality of goods. And the movement for quality probably comes out of Japan, and was probably before that inspired by American quality, so-called quality gurus, quality evangelists who went to Japan and preached the importance of quality. No one else would listen to them. The Japanese did, and the Japanese started, to a large extent, started to move towards quality. And from there we have the advent of total quality management and all of the issues associated with the development of quality and the emphasis on quality. So productivity and moving towards better quality products, these are two big movements that needs to be borne in mind by management as well. And part and parcel of the quality point is better communications with the customers. Customers are now able to perhaps speak to the producers directly, speak to them online, leave emails or engage in chat. Many sites have chat facilities. They're able to chat with a customer representative in the company and have issues sorted out. It can be anything from something faulty to not knowing how to use the product adequately, or the documentation was not quite right, or whatever. But the point is, the producer now is in contact with the customer. And that also is a major change in the way the world of commerce works. In the past, the producers made the product, sent it, let's say, to an agent. Could be, let's say, a warehouse. The warehouse would, let's say, send it to retailers, and if there was a fault, the customers would go back to the retailers, and the retailers would try to do something about it. But now they're able to go directly to the producers, and that is a major difference. There's also shorter delivery times. There's more emphasis on meeting the orders that are being received. Companies don't get deflected into making for stock, and the order books almost are neglected because the company is so fixated on making for stock. Now the delivery times take priority. In fact, there are initiatives, just in time, for example, in which they try to sequence production, sequence the deliveries of raw materials into a production system which is extremely efficient and will make products directly from the order books to meet the current order books, so that the customer can expect a very speedily treatment. They can expect to have the product within a short space of time. Now these are major changes. There's reducing labour and material costs. Over and above the globalization point we talked about earlier with cheaper labour in other countries. But there's also reducing labour costs because productivity is increasing. Because workers are becoming more skilled. They're able to deal with different functions, and they're able to deal with functions easier because, in a sense, they're acculturated to the technological environment in which we find ourselves. So they are not reticent, or they're not worried about using computer-aided manufacturing techniques. Once they're trained, they can use them, and they can monitor the machines. The machines are very productive, but we have falling labour costs and falling material costs as the whole of industry becomes orientated around this ideal of efficiency. So distribution, logistics, production, manufacturing, all of these areas are separately becoming efficient and yet integrated into a whole system that delivers a quality product. Operations management deals with the transformation of inputs, such as raw materials and labour, into outputs in the form of finished goods and services. In a sense, it's a very simple idea. We have inputs, raw materials, machine time, labour, workers putting in the raw materials, and then the machine processing it, and out comes the output. So the activity, the manufacturing activity, is the transformation of the inputs into outputs. And that's all it is to a certain extent. That's it. We have the inputs going into production, and out of this transformation process we have the outputs. Now, operations management and the organization. Well, we have the marketplace where the products are dealt with. They're sold to the customer, and prices are determined and so on. But we also have corporate strategy, which is derived from the marketplace. Corporate strategy depends on market functions. The market does not depend on corporate strategy. The consumers in the market are not influenced by the corporate strategy. It's corporate strategy that's influenced by the market. The market determines the price. The market determines the quantity purchased. So corporate strategy must take these as guidelines in setting its own strategy. So the business sets its strategy from the marketplace. And out of the corporate strategy we get the marketing strategy, the operations strategy, the finance strategy. We get a HR strategy, and we get different strategies. I've listed 3 here, but within an organization we might have many strategies. But all of these individual strategies feed back to the corporate strategy. So we have, let's say, in the operations strategy we could have making the product. This could be engineering or woodwork, or whatever the process is. This is the doing one. This is the making one. It makes the product. The finance strategy is to ensure that the bills can be paid and there's sufficient working capital and so on. The marketing strategy is to ensure that the product produced meets the requirements of the customer. And of course you'll have research and development into new products and so on. So we have various departments, and in a sense that's the way the organization is structured. Now, the top-down approach to operations management. Well, operations strategy decisions. Then we have the strategic decision, which is the long-range decision. It looks at the needs of customers and capacity planning. Looks at how many customers are likely to be in the market and how much capacity will be required. So it's looking at the strategic planning for the business. Then we have the tactical, the medium range, looking at the efficient scheduling of resources, making sure that what the company has got is being used effectively. So it's not aspirational like strategic, that the company is aspiring to get new machines or move premises or to develop new capacity. The tactical is looking at what they've got and trying to make the best of them. And then we have the operational planning and control, which is very short range. This is looking at the tasks that have to be produced now. What's on the order books and what needs to be done right now. It's the immediate tasks and activities confronting the business. So we have strategic planning, if you like, at the top, and then we have the tactical planning, which links to the strategic planning. It's a shorter term, it's medium range. And then we have the operational planning, which is the day-to-day. But we have a planning framework. That's the point. The businesses are not just drifting along from one time period to the next, hoping that they're getting it right or hoping that certain things will happen. They are more or less in charge of their destiny because they've got plans. Now, the plans may be realistic or not realistic, depending, but they should have been adequately discussed and ironed out, and criticisms sought and further comments sought, and so the plans should be realistic. The environmental changes that the business experiences may upset the plans, so there may have to be a process of updating and modifying the plans. But at least the business is not drifting along. It's got a plan. It's aiming in a particular direction. Now, the operational level, operational management perspective. The operational level, well, The function of the operations management is to add value through the transformation process. This is, if you like, the technical core, which converts inputs into outputs. So the operations management, who's these are, let's say, the operations management are the people who transform the inputs into the outputs. These are the ones who deal with this particular situation. There's physical manufacturing, making sure that the product is made, but also looking at locational, looking at transport and seeing what can be done with transport. Then there's exchange, retailing, for example, looking at getting the product to retailers and how retailers can deal with this and where they can position it. It's to extent overlapping with marketing, but it's making sure that the product is available to retailers in the quantities that they want. And it's looking at storage, looking when the product is made that it can be properly stored and it doesn't deteriorate, so that production is not lost. So some production may be in excess of the current orders. They have produced some for stock, let's say, which may be an issue in itself, because producing for stock is in a sense a waste of money. The resources of the business are now sitting idle if the company is holding stock. But some companies may do that, so there might be an issue of warehousing. But then there's the cost of warehousing and the cost of the raw materials and the time and so on taken to make the stock, which is just sitting there. So it's a waste. And physiological, the operations management should look at healthcare and make sure that the business has been run efficiently and effectively, but also with regard to the welfare of the people in the business. And they should also look at the informational infrastructure of the business, make sure that communications within the business runs smoothly, and also any contacts with the outside run smoothly as well. And for that reason, the business may have, depending on the size of the business, they may have a local area network, which will greatly facilitate communications and the propagation of information around the system. So the information can be made available very quickly throughout the system. So in the transformational process, we have the external factors, the factors that it's the market, which is outside of the business. Customers are not a part of the business. They use the product and have a demand for the product. There's the government. There's the various pressure groups related to the environment or to the image of the product or whatever. So you have external factors. You have the transformational process, which is converting the inputs into outputs. You have the various components, of course, that go into the transformational process, the raw materials, the components, labor, machine time, and so on. Those are the various components that go into the transformation process. And then we have the inputs, the actual raw materials themselves, or whatever goes in, energy and so on. And then on the other side, out pops the outputs. So we can see the business in that sort of light. We can make it more sophisticated, of course, because that's an extremely simple way of looking at the business. We could start to add in measurements, key performance indicators, and we can put in all sorts of quality measures and so on, and taking measurements, giving feedback, and adjusting the inputs if required, or adjusting the transformation process as required. So the feedback may be coming out of measurements taken and adjustments made. Of course, a real life business will have a lot more complexity than what I've got on the slide here. But that's just a nice way to envisage, to imagine the business. Very broad categories. Now, operations management and society. Well, the aspiration is for higher standards of living. And the aspiration is to increase productivity, increasing productivity means getting more output per worker or more output per machine. And this may be a function of technological development, but it may also be a function of more rationalization and more thought being put into the production process so that it's better organized, it's more efficient. It could be lower cost of goods and services. With greater productivity, there is a tendency for costs to fall, and this may be passed on in the form of lower cost of goods and services. We also have better quality of goods and services. It's not just getting more of them, it's getting better quality. More was once seen as the answer, getting more output. And economists were partially guilty of this because economists like the idea of measuring quantity because it's quite almost a mathematical notion. It's something that we can add up. The company produces 10 this week and 20 the next week. Well, its output is doubled. But when we introduce quality, it gets a lot more complicated because what's the quality of the goods being produced? What's the quality of the services? And quality is not easily measured. Competition increases quality, generally speaking. There is a drive for more quality because companies need to outcompete their competitors. They need to outwit them and have better quality products, better reputation and better value for money for the customers. So competition increases quality. And then there's concern for the environment. There's the whole idea of recycling and concern for air and water quality. And these are issues that occupy management as well. Plus, of course, better working conditions or improved working conditions, better job design and employee participation. People work in companies. Well, they're still people. They still have needs. They're human. They're not parts of the machine. They are thinking individuals. They are sentient. They have emotions. And they need stimulation. They need to be dealt with on a social level. They need to be spoken to, and they need to have rest periods and break up the day. They're not parts of the machine, and this must be recognized by the operations management as well. Now, the application of operations management to service operations. Well, you could have, for example, batch cooking in fast food takeaways. You know, it's an example. It's a service operation, the fast food takeaway, but you could have the goods produced and waiting for the customer, so the service within the outlet is very fast. It's been batch produced. It depends on the expertise of the management of the fast food takeaway. If they know there's going to be customers coming in at a certain time and they're confident about that, they may produce in advance. Of course, if they're not sure, they may not have produced in advance and there may be longer waiting times. But we also have just-in-time, JIT, trying to make the product just in time, just ready. This means there's no stock being held, there's no capital sunk into stock, there's no wasted resource. It's produced just in time. They have to have the confidence to receive the raw materials at the right time. Suppliers outside the business must be sequenced in a way, they must be dealt with in a way that they deliver exactly at the moment when the materials are required. And that might be an issue. And then we have automatic inventory replenishment. As inventories run down, depending on orders and the seasonal factors that confront the business, there might be automatic trigger points. Software, in effect, may signal that more inventory may be required and particular items may be taken into stock. So we have the application of organization management to service operations in various ways. It could be as I said, the illustration of the fast food takeaway, where it's a service, but they are producing in batch beforehand, just in time, trying to please the customer just when the customer wants. Just in time could apply in a restaurant. We place the order for a meal and the meal arrives shortly. We don't have to wait for hours and hours for the cook to try and find some food to process into our meal. So we can start to think along just in time in manufacturing and in services, and automatic inventory control to try and deal automatically with situations as they arise, and pre-program the facilities of the business to enable the business to deal with fluctuations in stock and deal with it efficiently. Now we could look at service and goods, and in a sense they overlap to form this idea of a product. So what we need to do really is distinguish between goods and services. So let's look at the differences between goods and services. Well, we'll start with goods. Generally speaking, goods are tangible. We can touch goods. They're physical things. So goods are tangible. And we can count up goods. We can keep them in stores. Goods can be stored up in the stores, and a stock of them can be held. They can be put into an inventory. And there's no interaction between the customer and the process. Generally speaking, goods of this nature, when they're produced, the people making the goods don't deal with the customers. The people who are building cars don't deal with the customers, the people who are going to buy the cars. So there's very little contact between the people who are producing the goods and the customers. And in most cases, there's absolutely no contact between them at all. Now services, well, not surprisingly, they're intangible. We can't touch the service. We go to a restaurant, we get a meal. The service can be good, or it could be bad. But it's not tactile. We can't touch the service. We can experience it. We can think the service was not very good. We had to wait too long and the food was cold and so on. That's about the service, but it's not about whether we can touch the service or not. We clearly can't touch the service. We experienced it instead. And we can't store up services. If we go to see an accountant for some advice about investment and get the advice on the investment, we can't store it. We can't keep that in the store and go back and check it every so often. It's advice. It's a service, so it can't be stored. Direct interaction between customer and process. In the case of services, there is. Go back to the restaurant again. The restaurant offers a service of offering food. And in this case, the customer goes to the restaurant. They're interacting with the seller of the service directly. So there is interaction between the customer and the process. Most products are a bundle of goods and services. We can think of hotels. Hotels offer a service as a place to sleep, but the hotels may also offer goods. It may offer meals. It may offer other services like advice on tourism and so on. Groceries shops, for example, will sell groceries. Those are all goods. But they also offer a service. They enable us to buy the groceries in an efficient manner, and they help us in laying out the products in a way that's understandable. They help us to make decisions. So they're offering a service as well, and they're enabling us to get the products in a convenient fashion. So when we think of goods and services, we're normally thinking of bundles of goods and services. They come together, generally speaking. Now let's look at an expanded definition of quality. Quality is important in all functional areas of the business. Quality is what the business is really about. It's trying to meet customer requirements, offer customers good value for money, offer them a good product. The quality is now much more than the technical requirements of for manufactured goods. Quality now runs across the whole services, run across until we get to after sales, and we get customer relations management, and we get direct contact between the customer and the business. Perhaps in the past that was not the case, but now, because of the advent of technology and communication systems, it's possible for the customer to contact the producer directly, so there's much more emphasis on quality. Service quality, customer relationships, is equally important. So it's also the case that there's greater emphasis on service quality, and that is driven to some extent by competition and also by information, greater information available about products. If customers have a bad experience, let's say in a restaurant again, if they have a bad experience in a restaurant, they may go home and write this up onto the internet where other people can read it, and that business will then lose custom. They have to, of course, make sure that it's a fair comment and it's not just put there out of malice. But if it is a fair comment, then that information circulates and the business could be affected. So the expanded view of quality is now that it's much more important than it was in the past. There's greater emphasis on it, there's greater knowledge on the part of producers and consumers about quality and the requirements for quality. So that's our introduction to operations management. That's the textbook that was used in the preparation, and that's all I'm going to deal with in this session. So I'm going to say thank you for watching.